Good morning, folks. Welcome to the Workout Product Hour. This is a bi-weekly webinar that we host 11 a.m. on Thursdays. You can register for the webinar and to receive recordings, even though you're not able to attend it or attend it in parts. And a Product Hour is where we talk about the different product features and how our customers have been using product features to build integrations to solve various business problems. And as you go through some of the scenarios that we are going to demo in this product hour, feel free to ask questions at any point in time. We want to keep it interactive, and we'll try to answer the questions during the demo or towards the end of the webinar as time permits. That said, just wanted to introduce the topic for today. It's advanced files and CSV processing. And today we'll be joined by Harish and Ishan from our product team to walk us through some of the challenges that customers face, especially when processing with large files and CSV files, which can have issues around variable headers or missing columns, whatever the case may be. So we have some good examples for us to go through, and hopefully you find this useful by the end of the hour.
Hi everyone, welcome back. This is Ishan here. Today, before we kick off, just want to go through again some basic concepts that it's useful to be aware of, in case you haven't joined us in the previous few product hours. So we were talking about on-prem connectivity and how we can work with files from on-premise systems or cloud systems. And when we say on-premise, we actually mean just any environment that sits behind a firewall. And Workato communicates through the on-premise agent through a secure tunnel. It gives users complete control of the network access, into this secure network of yours. And it can also, work with all kinds of types of files, through FTP protocols, just standard APIs, databases, and also working with legacy apps with custom applications. But with that said, here are some of the concepts that we're going to cover today. The more advanced features that our customers use when working with files and CSVs. And right off the top, of course, working with different sources. CSV files can come from on-premise networks, systems. It can be file systems like FTP or SFTP. It can also come from, again, standard APIs through HTTP. From your SaaS applications or any form of endpoints that you or your vendors use. Next, we'll cover working with large files, and when we say large, working with millions of rows, and streaming these CSV contents instead of processing them, row by row. And then we're going to cover parsing and composing CSVs using the Workato's utility. This is primarily to perform transformations with CSVs, and just parsing, creating CSV content from unstructured formats. And then we're going to talk about highlight this feature that we released recently to be able to work with variable headers. CSV files that may not have the same ordering, or also at the same time, CSV files that may not have the same headers and naming conventions. Yeah. So let's look at the first use case that we see. This is really one of our standard use cases, which is kind of to move large data from an on-premise system, so a large CSV file, and streaming it into a cloud system like for processing and forecasting, these kind of really high-powered analytical tools. Anaplan is one example. We see our users use it to perform forecasting, analyzing, and really, to really enrich and enrich their prediction models. So this use case really centers around a retail company with a large inventory, high turnover, right? A really high sales velocity, and they really need timely reports to um, to really be able to be agile with your inventory management, right? So predict how sales went last week and forecast what is needed for the next week to prepare inventory before the sales cycle begins again, right? So analytical tools like Anaplan, it really needs, the power of it is only as good as the data you provided. Our users need really up-to-date information to make forecasting as accurate as possible. So in this case, we're looking at processing millions of records efficiently, in a really short amount of time. So let's take a look at the recipe that makes this possible. So here we're seeing quite actually straightforward looking recipe. We actually trigger off new CSV files from your inventory at the end of each kind of weekly cycle, right? And then we upload this file to Anaplan and run an import on it. So when we're doing this upload, we're actually streaming it. We're not treating it as as a structured format. We're really just streaming the binary content into Anaplan. And once it's uploaded, we're going to run an import on this file to make the data ready for analyzing in Anaplan, and just to make this to perform
So,
error handling. If it, yeah, go ahead.
Ishan, so I see that there are two steps. You got upload file and run data import. So, what is the difference between the two steps? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, and this really is specific to Anaplan. Anaplan allows you to upload files, um, and as a separate step to importing it, right? So here, really, you can upload one or more files into a model in Anaplan, right? And then what you can do is actually to import, so turn content from all these multiple files and run it into a single, kind of a table in Anaplan for to be used when you perform your analytics processes.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's kind of just a separate step to, yeah.
So when you say streaming, where is the streaming happening here?
So the streaming, good question. So streaming actually, as you can see here, we a user would really just map the content from your on-premise file system and map it to this field, input field for uploading. The streaming happens beneath the covers. Vocado breaks down the files into smaller chunks and uploads them. Basically, just the content, right? We're not concerned about the structure, what it should look like. We're just opening up a stream and loading data. So this stream can be in multiple chunks. So basically, if we're looking at large files and more likely than not we are, we're breaking them into smaller parts and uploading them separately. To
Okay.
Yeah.
So, can you give an idea of what is the typical file sizes? I mean, if it is 2 GB, 3 GB, whatever file size, do we
Yeah.
take it transparently?
Yeah, and so what we see with customers that move in about 500 to a million rows, that it usually is within a range of 1 to 2 GBs. Yeah, so 1 or 2 GBs, and this we upload it in we the total job runtime is about 10 to 12 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's kind of the typical time range.
Okay.
Yeah, and as always with these kind of large imports, things don't always go as planned. If the import doesn't succeed, we we typically see users they want to have some form of backup reporting or handling of these errors. So created what we're doing actually is just sending the email with the template of what went wrong, kind of. Yeah. So this is like again this is really almost a standard with a lot of our customers that are moving large volumes of data. Streaming is the best approach, and we recommend this for both.
Ishan,
Yeah.
Ishan, sorry, can you go back to the previous recipe? Sorry. So, how does the output of the trigger look like for this? Because I think probably that will be quite helpful to know, right?
Yeah.
So,
So the output contains both metadata and actual data of the file. But this, so things like the file path and the name, these metadata create time, modified timestamp, the size, and then also file contents, as in the actual data within the file. It's all provided as a single input field. So this content can be a CSV content, it can be a text file or any type of content.
basically, this is the raw content, right? This is not a parsed content.
Exactly. This is raw. There's no parsing involved. It's purely for streaming purposes.
So in a classic, the ETL perspective, this is really ELT. We are doing extracting and loading, we're not doing transformation here.
You're right. Yeah. So no transformation here. If with speed in mind, transformation is and is really a trend that we see with our customers. The transformation is actually done after the fact, after loading, and that's where the importing in Anaplan comes in. They're actually turning this raw data into structured ones within the system for to be used. Yeah. Yeah, like I said, again, this is the approach we recommend for moving large data, large data sets. So this will make things a lot faster. Okay, the next use case we're seeing is actually more ETL, so transformation before loading, separate from the previous use case. So this typically would not involve a large data set, not in hundred thousands or millions of rows range. This is more for smaller data sets, in the range of 10 or 100,000. Here's the scenario. Employee benefits provider, say, we'll have customers, different companies, and they they package health insurance policies for the employees of the customers, right? And these policies can come from multiple vendors for each customer. And one of the challenge is to really transform employee information from a standard format that you have in CSV, and transforming it into a CSV format that's accepted by these insurance providers. They all have different requirements, different formats, different naming conventions. So what's really important is to be able to transform and compose the right CSV in the right format, and to send it to file system that these providers can process, right? So typically, what we see is you can kind of receive this information from uh, yeah there is this concept of just transforming the rows, the columns, and also at the same time transforming the data. So we have so here's one of the recipes that does it, and this again, it's although it's simple, that the couple of steps where the complexity lies. Typically, if no transformation is needed, step one will not be there. All we need to do is just kind of like pick up CSV files from a folder, right? And just upload it to external source. But when transformation is needed, we can make use of the Vocado utility, which is to compose a CSV. And here what we're doing is we're first defining what the resultant CSV should look like, and we're mapping the data that comes from your original CSV, which will in turn output the CSV content, right? Again, this is just the raw format, and this is where we can stream it to your destinations. Like in this case, we're looking at Amazon S3, but we can also move it to SFTP, or if needed, another a separate secure network using the on-premise file connector.
So Ishan, does the Compose CSV support streaming?
It doesn't. So in this case, we're actually looking at moving data in batches, right? And this now we're not looking at use cases that require streaming. This with transformation, we are actually processing them in batches, right? In the range of 100 to 2,000 rows at once. Perform the mapping, right, and transformation before we upload it. So the upload portion is streaming, but not the compose side of things. Yeah.
So there is a question about why do you need Compose CSV? Let me try to answer that. Ishan, correct me if my answer is in line with what with. Compose CSV is needed when the destination where you want to upload the CSV, it expects the format of the CSV to be to be different than the source, right? If you have a CSV file and you want to transform it into a different CSV file, column order is different, column names are different, so then it'll come handy. So is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And I would just add to that, some it's actually more common than you expect, right? Some transformation with the structure of the actual data matters, right? Some system requires coding of each of your rows, or they expect date in day, month, year instead of year, month, day. So these kind of transformation is really really common, and that's where the composing side, the compose action is really useful.
Can you scroll down and show the? So basically you can map the things. Okay.
Here's where we map. You can merge two data pairs into a single field. Example would be full name instead of first name and last name columns.
Okay.
Matching them, performing some form of simple formula to rearrange how the data is presented.
So basically, in a sense, this is the ETL scenario. You're actually doing the transformation before you're loading it.
Exactly.
Okay. And there was a question in the forum about whether our SFTP upload action, whether it supports streaming.
Yeah.
As far as I know, it does. Can you confirm that?
Yeah, it does. It does. It does streaming when we're mapping a streaming data pill. And if not, if it's just a standard text data pill mapped in, it would upload just a text field.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, in here, what is the from the recipe author? How do they have to worry about whether it's streaming or not?
Okay, I found this on the web for Yehud. What is the item from the recipe author?
There is no need to think about whether it's streaming or not, right? When the recipe author sees file content, you can just map any data pill in, right? Vocado recognizes if streaming is needed, and by that I mean if you're mapping a streaming data pill to a streaming input field, and if it's necessary to break down the data within the pill into smaller parts and uploading in the stream, then yes, Vocado does that automatically.
Okay.
Yeah, this a good one. Okay. So again, some providers don't allow you to kind of do it in CSV, through the SFTP. It can also be through HTTP protocol, right? In rarer examples, that's also possible. But I like to move on now to this feature that I really like to highlight, right? It is the idea of working with CSV files that may not be consistent, and the scenario is this, right? The example is, for companies that work with multiple vendors, it's in reality is really really difficult to always receive CSV files in a strict format from your vendors, right? It could be a new vendor or a vendor that that does constructs these files manually. So it's more error prone process. So sometimes you get CSV files with columns in different orders, or you get CSV files with different header names. So it becomes difficult really to have a single automation that where you can expect consistent file format, right? And here's where Vocado's Vocado come in, right? We make it easy to work with different kinds of situations, right? When you're receiving a CSV file with a different column order, we can recognize it by the header name and be flexible with where we're reading data from. Or it can also be with CSV files that have unexpected columns, or just really missing columns within the CSV, right? So what we do is we recognize a single column by we can recognize a single column by its header name, and understand the file that way. And when a recipe author kind of maps the data pills within the recipe, um, he or she doesn't need to be concerned about the ordering, right? If you're mapping state, the state data pill, it's going to read from the state column wherever it is um, within your CSV file. So
Ishan,
yeah,
so I guess in a way, isn't this what is expected typically of the CSV, in the sense that when you have a
yeah.
column, a name, I mean, so what is the alternate use case for this, in the sense, what is the other scenario here?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the two ways that the CSV columns and the data within each column can be processed. When what I described was to recognize columns by the header name. The alternative to that is really to recognize columns by the index, right? The in sequence. So column 1, 2, 3, and 4. That is the more typical way of as far as we've seen, the more typical way of reading data in a CSV file. If that is useful, in situations where CSV files may have different header names, right? If you can expect very consistent ordering of columns but inconsistent header names, then ordering by the column order would be the better approach to reading data from a CSV file.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So it really depends on when on the case by case scenario, right? If you can expect strict CSV ordering versus strict CSV header names, then you have to pick the right way of ordering the columns, of recognizing it. So yes, just going through this, traditional CSV readers, require strict ordering. It's really time, typical solution to having a bad CSV, or reading a CSV that's unexpected, is really to go back to your vendor, request for a new CSV in the right format. This is really time consuming and even more error prone. So again, being able to intelligently match header names to a column can solve this pain point. So here's the recipe that does that, right? Before going into actions, I like to draw attention to the trigger, and this is where you can configure how you want to keep track of columns, right? It's a pick list, with two, so we can keep track of columns either by the order of the columns or by name. Again, so if we say by name, it will recognize the exact header name, and it no matter where it is within the CSV file, right? And in cases where your CSV file is in a strict order, but the header names may change, we recommend keeping track of them by the column order instead.
So what was the default setting in the past, Ishan?
Yeah, the default setting in the past is to keep track of them by the column order.
Okay.
So for the sake of backward compatibility, we've set the default to order. But we've seen more and more cases where our customers cannot expect that level of consistency. So the column name is a really good solution to their problems. So this recipe reads CSV files, dumped into an SFTP directory by one or more by all the vendors. They're picking it up and checking, if and again, so here we're actually receiving this CSV file, lines in batches, right? It's not a stream here. So we're checking, right? If this is the first batch, I'm going to look to check if there is an existing CSV file. Right? I'm just going to see it. And if I find one, I'm going to mark this as outdated. And after that, I'll upload a new file to the folder and say, okay, this is a new file, and upload the first batch content into this new file, right? And if this is not the first batch, so any successive batches will just append the CSV lines to this file, right? So what we have, so this pattern, this design pattern allows the user to keep track of older files, to kind of create a log of the older files, while having constantly an up-to-date file. In this case, it could be
Dan,
yeah.
can you actually show the upload
Yeah.
upload new file to the folder, and it'll be interesting to see how it looks, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. So we're actually mapping the file name here, and we're just mapping the lines into the content.
Okay, so lines are in this case it's a string. It's a string stream, isn't it?
Yes, is a string.
String. Okay. So where does the name reordering happen? In this case, it doesn't matter which order the order the incoming columns are. It'll always be in the order in which you are specified in the trigger. Is written in the order in which you are specified in the trigger. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So the data can come, say say we have a column, we have a CSV file with we define it as A, B, and C, right? But if we receive it as A, C, and B, what the trigger will do is return it, recognize the reordering, and return it as A, B, and C again. So we can, so the content that we are uploading would be the ordering that we first defined, right?
Okay.
The reshuffling of order is done automatically.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Can you show the output of the trigger also?
Sure.
So lines. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Here's also where we can see this. It comes in handy, really, first batch and last batch, right? Recognizing if we are reading a new CSV file, or we're reading the last batch of that file. So you can do a lot of these workflow type processes, like alerting, sending notification of a successful upload of the whole file, or creating new files if it's a new one.
Thanks, Ishan.
Hey,
Yeah.
Ishan, we just have a question. I think Harish answered this earlier, but the question is, does the connector used to upload a file to an SFTP site also do streaming automatically? So,
Yes, it can. It can also do streaming automatically. Yeah. So just to reiterate, right? If we're mapping data pairs that do not need streaming, the field would, just take that chunk and upload it as one single upload. But if the data behind the mapping requires streaming, then Workato would do it automatically. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
Okay. So yeah, back to this. So this one really is the takeaway here is to recognize the challenge that you're faced with. Do you have a problem with variable header names or really variable column ordering? And in either case, there would be a better way to keep, there will be an ideal way to keep track of your CSV columns. Yeah. Okay. And this next scenario that we're looking at is again, streaming high volumes of CSV content, large number of rows, right? And this one really is the scenario here is this, right? Say e-commerce platform, e-commerce company wants to roll out a campaign, right? A marketing campaign. We You want to release promotions, limited time offers, right? To selected group of users, selected products, or even just packages of different products. Um, this this whole process from end to end is really tough. There are multiple levels of complexity, right? Just the whole promotion and discount structure requires a really complex pricing model, and typically you need a really powerful analytical tool to really process that and come up with the to really analyze your pricing strategy and come up with the final discount. So the customers would have to bring together multiple applications, right? Like Hadoop for processing, and coming up with prediction of the most compelling price point, um, and linking that with your sales platform like Salesforce to upload the price book entry, right? To really keep your sales team up to date. And lastly, with the Marketo system to really kickstart this campaign to send out the right the necessary email alerts, right? To make to let your customers be aware of this, and also at the same time to add to complexity with larger companies. You have to think about things like multiple locations, different regions, and individual stores within your region, right? So all these create a very high inertia to really launch a campaign, and typically it takes weeks to months just to prepare all these things. Workato helps you to streamline this process, to make this to enable more agile form of pricing strategies. So let's look at the recipe, right? That makes this possible. Here we're looking at a trigger, that is a callable recipe. This recipe is a callable one. It can also be exposed as a REST endpoint, right? If you can kind of also trigger it off workbook commands, or a click of a button, right? In your own proprietary softwares. What we do here is first to download the price book content from a system like Hadoop, right? And create or update a new price book for this particular campaign, right? And at the point we want to upload all the price book entries, like and price book entries here, I'm referring to individual products, the price, and to specific user segments, right? Here what we're doing is a stream, we're actually streaming data from Hadoop to Salesforce.
So where is Hadoop running in this case, Ishan?
Well, see, here Hadoop can be running, in your secure network. Well, the master node can be running in a secure network with any number of slaves to speed up process, right?
But the adapter itself is a on-prem. Is it an on-prem adapter, or can it connect to a Hadoop running on the cloud?
Yeah, you're right. So this connector needs to run on the on-prem agent. But from the on-prem agent, it can connect to Hadoop instance clusters in the cloud.
Okay. Part of the reason is most of the time when Hadoop is running in any organization, it is running inside a private network, and they won't expose it on a public network. So that's part of the reason why it requires on-prem agent access.
Yeah. And so the streaming that happens from Hadoop to Salesforce, we're looking at, again, large files, gigabytes, millions of rows. This action is also a long action. It's a concept of triggering, working with asynchronous APIs, right? Triggering off an import and constantly checking on the progress, right? And once
in this case, what is the long action for Salesforce?
The first one, the long is step 3, the upsert in bulk from CSV file. Okay. What this does is, first we upload the CSV content to Salesforce, and we trigger a job in Salesforce to process the CSV file, right? Salesforce then would take, it's an asynchronous scenario, so Salesforce will take its time to process it, and the action, this long action, will check back with this job, right? Check on the status of this job at a regular interval, and then if we detect that successful, then we come back to and we'll move on to the other steps in the recipe. Yeah.
Okay. One of the questions that I had was in step 3, if you're using bulk, are we using Salesforce bulk V1 or V2 there? API.
Yeah, good question. Here we're using the V2 bulk API.
So in that case, can you describe what is happening in the error condition? When all records are not successfully processed, what are you doing there?
Right. So if it's successful, we obviously will launch a campaign, right? Kickstart and trigger the whole workflow. But if not, what we're doing here is uploading the content. We're uploading the content of the CSV rows that fail, right? And this is really returned from Salesforce, right? This will contain a CSV file with all the rows that failed to import, along with the reason, the error messages, and the reason for the failure, right?
Yes. Ishan, maybe here, talking about a difference between V1 and V2 might be relevant. So what happens is in V1 API, in Salesforce bulk API V1, you didn't really get the details of the actual row that failed. Other than the fact that row number 53 failed, you didn't really have the option of actually getting the data of the original row. Because quite often what used to happen is you might be updating a contact, and other than the fact that row 53 failed, you don't know which specific contact that failed. So in V2, you get the entire row that failed, and this allows us to retry the row if you need it, if needed, or upload the entire failed rows into maybe Dropbox into some location, and then introspect the failed rows and decide what is the corrective action.
Yeah, you're right. So the V2 API basically allows us to firstly retry, kind of retry with the original content, but also in the event that a retry fails with basically a validation error, business validation error that's persistent, then what we can do, which is the scenario here, which is to back up this file somewhere, right? For and trigger, send a message to your admins to take a look at the data, right, and figure out how to rectify this error.
Ishan, can you also go to step 3 and expand it? So this, can you describe what's happening here?
Yeah. So there are a couple of things that go into this action, right? Uploading a CSV file. So we can broadly classify them into the CSV content, input of the content, describing it, followed by the mapping, right? The keys to kind of say, okay, what is the identifier here, and lastly to perform the mapping to the mapping between your CSV file and ultimately the record, the object within Salesforce. So right at the top, we're streaming this file content. Here we're defining what to expect as the separator. It can be column, pipe, semicolon, or yeah, and then and we define the column names, right? We say, okay, this CSV you can expect to have price book ID, product ID, price, and things like that. After which we select the Salesforce object to import this data into, and then we select the primary key for this object. And when I say primary key, I mean what is the unique identifier? What is the ID of this price book entry? And specific to Salesforce, we're looking at the external ID. Yeah, right. So this yeah, and then after that, this point we'll be mapping the columns to the columns from the CSV to a field in the Salesforce object. In this case, because we're kind of mapping. You'll be mapping at a one-to-one. It's a one-to-one mapping, right? And at the end, yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Rishan.
Yeah, and then there is the advanced configuration, purely optional, ability to determine how you want this action to behave, right? By default, the action will wait for Salesforce to process all rows. And what this does is really to trigger off the long action behavior, right? So what selecting yes here would mean that we're telling the action to not just send the data and trigger off an import job, but to constantly check the status of this job, right? And once this job is successful and completed, completed, successful or not, to return with output, right? Return with the results of this import, this bulk job, together with details like whether all the rows were successful, what are the rows that were not successful with the content, and the error messages.
Also, one of the things that is really useful in here is being able to resolve the references. Let's say that you're uploading leads, and then you want to assign the leads to an account. So if the source has the external ID of the account, you'll be able to specify that
exactly.
during the upload. So there is an automatic resolution of an automatic binding of a lead to an account in one upload. So there we are using the underlying Salesforce feature.
Yeah. So establishing relationships between records, right, when we're uploading it. So an example would be over here we see price book ID column. If we have the actual Salesforce price book ID, we can map it here, right? And so this price book entry would appear automatically under this price book in Salesforce. And same goes for product here. We're identifying the exact product.
And I think this is slightly, advanced feature also, right? See, quite often the source system might not have the Salesforce ID. Source system will only have the ID that they price, if the price book is referred to by a whatever ID that they're referring to. At the Salesforce level, we'll mark that field as a in the price book, we'll mark that as an external ID, and hence the resolution can happen using the external ID rather than the Salesforce internal ID.
Yeah.
Hey, Ishan, we have a few questions that are interesting. So let's jump to the Q&A.
Yeah.
So the first one is, can Workato, like if, so aside from, the delimited files, the other type of files that often gets processed, it's a fixed format, right?
Yeah.
So meaning columns are specified by position. So how do customers process those files?
So that is a really interesting question. So out of the box, we don't support fixed width. In this case, kind of the broad term is fixed width CSV formats. But our customers have used they use custom kind of scripts and custom connectors, or just a standard Workato Ruby code to really do the transformation and plugging the data from within fixed width files. So a little bit of creativity is involved to work with these files.
Ishan, I remember seeing some custom adapters for this. Is
Yes.
that something?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that was the one I'm referring to. A customer created custom adapter basically to receive fixed width CSV files together with definition of the width, right? Like column A would be the first 20 characters, column B the next 50. They take this information, do some very basic scripting, and it outputs the column values of each line in the CSV. Okay. So that's one of the approach that our customers have used. Yeah.
Thanks, Ishan. So next question, when you're working with the SFTP or FTP server and you're getting the files with the trigger, right? Often, like the system that's publishing files to that location the file could be partial, right? So how do customers ensure that the file is complete and ready for consumption, right?
So let me try to answer this. All right. This again kind of depends upon bit of a convention in the sense that you need to have a staging directory in your FTP system, and then the completed directory. So the actual upload can happen to the staging directory, and in the recipe, after the upload is done, you're going to move it to the expected directory. So that way, you're not going to have a file in that directory until the upload is complete. So quite often, copying is a much faster operation than on the transfer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also, I think one of the practice that we've seen customers do is to mark files with like processing extensions, while it's still in a partial form, right? And only at the end to remove a flag, this processing flag, to know that this files, the transfer is complete.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's kind of a variation of the same. You know,
Yeah,
essentially there is a staging step and completion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Are there more questions, Teddy?
So this comes up very often. Like CSV is a derived, like it's common separate values like you can get from Excel or create on your own. And oftentimes, like business users, they just drop Excel files, and then there's a manual step of converting that into CSV. So is there a way for Workato to consume the raw Excel instead of CSVs?
Ishan, are you aware of the custom adapter extensions for?
Yeah. Well, we have one at least, right, customer that I'm aware of that does this. So instead of using an extension, what they're doing is, they're running a command line script, right? So they're using a command line tool to convert Excel files into a CSV, right? So the technology to convert it from Excel to CSV is separate, right? It's an extension, separate library. But what Workato offers is, what they're doing with Workato is to trigger off this process and then process the CSV as a result of that.
So when you say command line, what do you mean by that? I mean, can you actually automate this whole process?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
does the customer have to run this on command line?
No. So the customer, can. I would love to show it. So a customer would use the command line action to execute a command line script, and then have process the CSV as the next step from that. So this can be triggered automatically. There's no need to manually and physically run this command line script.
Do we have any command line tools that we recommend people for converting this?
I can't remember the name of this off the top of my head. Let's circle back with
Essentially, our command line adapter can run any batch files or anything that you run at the command line, and in theory, you could write a batch file for converting it, or a VB script or whatnot, and you'll be able to, when you write this thing, you'll be able to target a specific
file.
Specific file, and within a specific file, you'll be able to target a specific sheet. So I think that flexibility is there, because it is best to use the Microsoft tools for converting Excel to CSV, because quite often other tools, they always fall short in certain edge cases.
Yeah.
Ishan, the last question. We're almost out of time, and you can just answer yes or no, which is, often like the data contains like different character sets or different languages, like the Chinese characters or Japanese characters, maybe in the data. So how does Workato process from a compatibility standpoint? Is there anything special that users need to do, or Workato takes care? Is it compatible with the various character sets?
Yeah, I think at the base level, we're looking at the encoding. So we support a wide range of encoding formats. So a user can very simply just use the appropriate one for their characters, and it should work.
Okay. Thanks, Ishan. Thanks, Harish. And folks, Thanks for all your questions. If we were not able to answer that, I'll reach out to you separately and answer those. And any follow-ups that we can have, we can carry it over to email. Once again, we'll send you the recording of the webinar tomorrow, and do register for the next one 2 weeks from now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great week.
Thank you.